We're the show that tries to cut through all the noise and really pull out the key bits of knowledge.
That's the goal.
And today we're doing a deep dive into something that really, well, it challenges a core idea of democracy, doesn't it? The free and independent press.
Absolutely. We're always told, the media is the watchdog. It keeps power in check.
But what if that independence wasn't always? Well, what if it was sometimes actively compromised by, say, the CIA?
Exactly. That's our mission today. We're looking at Operation Mockingbird. It was this historical CIA program specifically designed to influence the media, covertly, of course.
And we've been digging into declassified documents, investigative reports.
Yeah, lots of material. And what comes out about just how involved the CIA was, it's pretty jarring.
Jarring is a good word. I mean, just to give everyone a sense of the scale right off the bat, think about this figure. It comes from William Sharp's testimony to Congress. Roughly a third of the entire CIA budget was going towards secret propaganda operations.
That's hundreds of millions, maybe even close to $1 billion a year back then.
Spent by the U.S. government secretly to influence media. It just shows you, doesn't it, how incredibly important they thought controlling public perception was. Maybe even more important than traditional spying.
It seems that way. And to understand how an operation like this even got started, we need to go back a bit to 1948, right after World War II.
Okay.
So you have the Marshall Plan starting up, right? This big American project to rebuild Europe.
Right, helping allies get back on their feet. Seems straightforward.
Well, yes. But hidden inside that, there was this funding mechanism for something totally different.
Okay.
The CIA basically siphoned off Marshall Plan money to set up something called the Office of Policy Coordination, the OPC.
OPC, what was that?
That was the agency's covert action wing. Their job was propaganda, economic warfare, messing with hostile states, supporting anti-communist groups, all of that kind of stuff.
So money meant for rebuilding Europe was secretly paying for clandestine ops.
Pretty much. That tells you a lot about the early Cold War mindset.
And this wasn't some low-level thing. It was sensitive right from the start.
Extremely. We're talking about Director Allen Dulles himself or his top people, often personally handling the recruitment of journalists, training intel officers for these propaganda roles.
They clearly saw it as absolutely critical.
No doubt. Now, there's this common idea, right, that the CIA just sort of snuck agents into newsrooms, nobody a wiser.
Yeah, like infiltration.
But the sources paint a different picture, a more disturbing one, frankly.
Yeah.
It seems the recruitment of journalists often happened with the top brass, the management, the owners fully aware and complicit.
Wait, so not just rogue agents, the bosses knew. It was like an arrangement.
That seems to be the case. You look at the Church Committee hearings, that was the big investigation later on. Former CIA Director William Colby, he put it bluntly, he said, quote, "Let's go to the managements. They were witting."
They were witting. Wow. So the heads of these media giants knew and they cooperated.
That's the implication. Actively cooperated.
And we're not talking small town newspapers here, are we? Which big media outlets are we talking about?
It was a significant list. The New York Times, Newsweek, Associated Press, the Miami Herald, CBS, Time Inc., Life magazine.
The New York Times. They had a policy for this.
According to the sources, yeah. Arthur Hayes Sulzberger, the publisher back then, apparently set a policy of providing cover for CIA agents.
That just fundamentally shifts how you think about their independence, doesn't it?
It really does. And the scale.
Yeah.
Carl Bernstein, from Watergate.
Yeah, legendary reporter.
He found evidence suggesting over 400 American journalists secretly did work for the CIA over like 25 years.
400? What were they doing?
All sorts of things. Gathering intel, sure.
Yeah.
But also acting as what was termed ambassadors without portfolio. Basically using their journalist access to do unofficial diplomatic work for the government.
And these were respected journalists.
Many were. Pulitzer Prize winners among them, apparently. And while a lot of this happened overseas, the main goal, you see, was often to get certain stories the agency liked, with the right angle circulating back home in the American press.
Okay.
By 1953, Mockingbird reportedly had major influence over something like 25 newspapers and wire services. And often these were run by people known for their right-wing views. Think William Paley at CBS, Henry Luce at Time.
So the CIA wasn't just passively getting info from reporters, they were actively, ordering up articles.
Sometimes, yes. Frank Wisner, who ran OPC, would apparently commission articles. Journalists would get classified info to help them write these pieces.
All to shape the narrative reaching American homes.
Exactly. And it went beyond news articles. They created front organizations overseas.
The fronts? You mean like fake news outlets?
Essentially, yeah.
Yeah.
They looked independent on the surface, but were secretly run by the CIA. The Rome Daily American is a classic example. 40% CIO owned for 3 decades.
30 years. That's, wow. What's also deeply unsettling is that it wasn't just about pushing their message. It was also about silencing others, right? Targeting certain viewpoints.
Absolutely. That was a key part of the strategy. They'd build relationships with these big media owners, often right-leaning guys like Paley at CBS, and they'd pass along information about journalists, actors, screenwriters, anyone they thought had left-wing views.
Where did that info go?
Sometimes to friendly politicians, like Senator Joseph McCarthy, which, of course, fed directly into the blacklisting era.
Blacklisting, just the word is chilling. What did that actually mean for the people targeted? The human cost.
It was devastating. Take the actor Lee J. Cobb. He was blacklisted. He talked about it later, saying when the facilities of the government of the United States are drawn on an individual, it can be terrifying.
Terrifying. I can only imagine.
He described losing work, having his passport taken, being constantly watched, facing these implied threats. He said he eventually gave in because he had no money, couldn't borrow any, and had kids to feed. He felt he had to make some kind of gesture just to escape the pressure, to become employable again. It was just this awful, crushing control.
And this wasn't just impacting news and print. Hollywood was a huge focus, too. You're saying the CIA even wrote scripts.
Directly involved in script writing, yes. A really clear example is the animated version of George Orwell's Animal Farm from 1954.
Animal Farm. Okay, I know the book.
Right. And Orwell was a socialist. His book is a critique of authoritarianism, yeah.
Okay.
But it hits both capitalism and communism. The CIA secretly funded the movie.
Oh.
And they changed the ending. They basically took out the critique of capitalism, made it look better, and focused only on condemning Stalinism. They twisted Orwell's message to fit their agenda.
So they weren't just reporting news, they were altering classic literature, fundamentally changing the story people received?
Precisely. Manipulating the narrative at a really deep level. And you have to remember, Hollywood studios weren't exactly fighting this off.
Why not? Were they easy targets?
In many ways, yes. They were already doing a lot of self-censorship, trying not to offend anyone. And the studio heads, they were fiercely patriotic, very anti-communist. They often saw cooperating with the government as their duty.
And then you had things like HUAC.
Exactly. The House Un-American Activities Committee. They held hearings, pressured people. You had friendly witnesses, naming names, people with supposed left-wing ties. And those who refused to cooperate, like the Hollywood 10, got blacklisted.
So the environment was ripe for CIA influence. Did they have people actually inside the studios pushing their agenda?
It appears so. There were figures like Luigi Loraschi at Paramount. His job title involved censorship, but it was described as ironing out any political, moral, or religious problems. And crucially, inserting in their scripts and in their action the right ideas with the proper subtlety.
Inserting the right ideas.
Yeah.
Even down to things like race.
Even race relations. The CIA apparently pushed for scenes showing black and white people mixing equally. Not really for social justice reasons, though. It was more about combating the Soviet propaganda line that America was deeply racist and hypocritical about democracy. They wanted to counter the idea the left was using race to undermine the U.S.
That level of calculated narrative control is just astonishing. There was another example you mentioned involving Graham Greene's novel, The Quiet American.
Yes, that's another powerful case study. The novel's set in Vietnam. It features a CIA agent character, Alden Pyle, who most people think was based on a real CIA figure, Edward Lansdale.
Okay.
So the director, Joseph Mankiewicz, makes a film version. But first, he meets with the real Lansdale.
And after that meeting,
Mankiewicz completely changed the tone. Greene's book is pretty strongly anti-American intervention, the film. It becomes basically an apology for U.S. policy in Vietnam. Lansdale himself loved it, said it was an excellent change that would win friends for America in Vietnam.
And Graham Greene.
He was furious, absolutely livid, said his book was never meant to be propaganda for a corrupt government. It just shows the sheer audacity of reshaping a critical work into its opposite.
Okay, this is a lot to take in. Let's take a quick break right there. We've covered how Mockingbird reached outwards into newsrooms, Hollywood, shaping culture. When we come back, we need to talk about how these control tactics got even closer to home, even involving surveillance.
At CBS, we had been contacted by the CIA. As a matter of fact, by the time I became the head of the whole News and Public Affairs operation in 1954, ships had been established.
What if I told you that some of the most trusted news stories from the mid-20th century weren't just justified by journalists, but by the CIA itself?
That planted stories intended to serve a national purpose abroad came home and were circulated here and believed here.
The very foundation of media trust and journalistic integrity was quietly being manipulated by a covert operation designed to shape public opinion during one of the most tense and pivotal times in global history, the Cold War. This operation, known as Operation Mockingbird, was more than just a strategic move by the United States. It was a sweeping campaign to control narratives, influence ideologies, and steer the collective consciousness of entire nations.
Because this would mean that the CIA could manipulate the news in the United States by channeling it through some foreign country. Now, we're looking at that very carefully.
But how exactly did the CIA manage to pull this off?
The sharing of biased and false news has become all too common on social media. More alarming, some media outlets publish these same fake stories without checking facts first.
The sharing of biased and false news
has become all too common on social media.
More alarming, some media outlets publish these stories without checking facts first.
Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think. And this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
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 Wow, what an interesting soundbite. It's seriously the sheer depth of this manipulation and how hidden it all was.
Yeah.
It's really something else.
It really is. Welcome back to the deep dive. Before the break, we were talking about the, frankly, incredible reach of Operation Mockingbird influencing news, movies, culture. But it gets even more disturbing because the control attempts didn't stop there. They actually turned inwards, involving direct domestic surveillance on journalists.
Yeah, in 1963, there was this specific operation, actually codenamed Project Mockingbird, involving phone taps.
Project Mockingbird. Okay, who are they targeting?
Two specific Washington-based newsmen. The sources just call them Iden 1 and Iden 2. They were suspected of leaking classified stuff, sometimes really sensitive code word material.
Stuff that needed top clearance.
Exactly. And the key thing here, this was domestic spying. The CIA charter specifically forbids that.
But they did it anyway. Who approved it?
It went right to the top. DCI John McConey approved it, but he coordinated with Attorney General Robert Kennedy, Defense Secretary Robert McNamara, the head of the DIA.
So the highest levels of the Kennedy administration knew.
It seems so. And President Kennedy himself apparently signed off on similar surveillance against other journalists, like Michael Gettler.
So this wasn't some rogue operation. It was sanctioned at the very top. How did they do it? The surveillance.
Round-the-clock phone taps. On their homes, their shared office, they got help from someone inside the phone company.
And what did they find out? Was it productive?
Oh, incredibly productive, according to the reports.
Right.
In terms of identifying sources, anyway. Huh. They logged calls linking the leaks to 13 newsmen, 12 senators, 6 congressmen, loads of congressional staff, government employees, even White House staff.
Wow.
It showed these reporters were getting way more classified info than they could ever print. And sometimes they'd pass stories along to other journalists. So leaks appearing under one name might have actually come from these guys originally.
Did they find the main source inside the CIA itself?
No, interestingly. They couldn't pinpoint the leak within the CIA's own Office of National Estimates. And get this, sometimes the reporters would get tipped off by their sources that they were being investigated.
The sources warned them. Incredible. Beyond spying, the CIA also tried to actively stop critical books and documentaries, didn't they?
Oh, yeah. In 1964, DCI McConey really tried to shut down the publication of Invisible Government. There's a book by David Wise and Thomas Ross detailing CIA ties to the military-industrial complex, its influence on foreign policy. Stuff the agency really didn't want out there.
How far did they go to stop it?
They actually considered buying up the entire first print run of the book.
Buying all the copies.
Yeah, just to keep it off the shelves. But Random House, the publisher, basically said, fine, we'll just print a second edition.
Yeah.
So the idea got dropped. McConey also tried, and failed, to censor an NBC documentary about the CIA.
And it wasn't just books or TV. They went after magazines, too, using dirty tricks.
Absolutely. Ramparts magazine, which was a left-wing publication, planned to expose CIA funding of the National Student Association back in '66.
Okay.
The head of covert ops at the time, Desmond Fitzgerald, ordered one of his guys, Edgar Applewhite, to basically sabotage the magazine. Applewhite later admitted they had awful things in mind and actually carried off some of them to hurt Rampart's circulation and finances.
Just actively trying to destroy a publication they didn't like. Now, officially, the CIA says Mockingbird ended in 1976, but not everyone buys that, right? There are claims it continued.
That's right. Several investigative journalists, Steve Kangas, Angus McKenzie, Alex Constantine, they've all argued it didn't really stop. Kangas, for example, claimed in the late 90s that the conservative billionaire Richard Mellon Scaife was running a CIA propaganda front called Forum World Features.
And Kangas, didn't he die under suspicious circumstances?
He did. He was found dead in Scaife's office, ruled a suicide, but the police report itself noted discrepancies. It's one of those lingering questions.
Definitely. Now, the big formal investigation that brought a lot of this to light was the Church Committee, 1975-76. What were their main takeaways?
The Church Committee was huge. They confirmed the CIA still had this network of several hundred foreign individuals around the world used for propaganda and intel gathering. These people gave the CIA direct access to tons of foreign media, newspapers, press services, TV, radio, book publishers.
A global network.
And they found over 1,000 books had been produced, subsidized, or sponsored by the CIA. And these books made their way back into the U.S. market. Often the CIA had direct input on the content, making sure it fit their operational and propagandistic intention.
1,000 books. Wow. What about U.S. journalists?
They found over 50 U.S. journalists were directly on the payroll. And many, many more had these close but undocumented financial ties to the agency.
So this wasn't just a few isolated cases. It was widespread, deeply integrated. The committee highlighted two big reasons why this was so concerning, right?
They did. Two core problems. First, the obvious potential for these covert operations to manipulate or even accidentally mislead the American public. People just wouldn't know the source or the bias.
And the second,
the damage it did to the credibility of the press itself. These secret relationships between the CIA and journalists and media organizations, it just eroded the whole idea of a free, independent press that people relied on.
Yeah, it fundamentally breaks that trust. The public was, as you said, basically unaware of the propaganda they have been ingesting for decades. Unlike, say, state-run media where you kind of know what you're getting.
Exactly. The hidden nature is what makes it so insidious.
Did these findings lead to any actual changes, any new rules?
Yes, there was a change. In 1976, George H.W. Bush, who had just become CIA director, announced a new policy. They would stop paying accredited U.S. news correspondents.
Stop paying them?
But, he added, voluntary unpaid cooperation was still welcome.
Ah. So the door wasn't entirely closed?
Seems not.
When you step back and look at the whole thing, Operation Mockingbird, the sheer scale is just breathtaking. Siphoning funds, blacklisting people, writing movie scripts, spying on reporters. It's staggering. It forces you to question that bedrock idea of a free press.
It certainly shows a period where the very foundations of information the news people consumed were being deliberately shaped, often without anyone knowing.
Exactly. And that makes you think, doesn't it, about today. What does this history mean for how we should view information now? How do we think about truth or objectivity when we know this kind of manipulation happened within institutions we trusted?
It really raises a crucial question for you listening right now. We know from this history that top media owners and managers were, in some cases, willing participants. We also know media ownership is way more consolidated today than it was back then.
Fewer companies owning more outlets.
Right. So what does that potentially mean? Does it raise new questions about hidden agendas, about whether the news sources we rely on are truly independent?
What does it really take to be truly well-informed in a world where we know the foundations of journalism themselves have been compromised like this in the past? Something to definitely think about as you scroll through your newsfeed today. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
The media being used as a propaganda mechanism, we saw it flatly. I mean, I think it's the smoking gun, quite frankly, of the Obamagate narrative and the Russiagate narrative, that it was so baked in that the New York Times and Washington Post went and ran with it. Some would say that that's part of Operation Mockingbird.
Some would say that that's part of Operation Mockingbird.
Some would say that that's part of what we learned in the Church Committee, that the intel agencies were using media outlets as their mouthpieces, and that those mouthpieces would parrot the official narrative. And I wanted to ask you, is this operation still going on? Are you aware of the intel agencies working directly with media outlets in order to push prescribed narratives that may or may not be true?
It's something that we've already had to deal with, Benny, within this administration, where there are people within the intelligence community who believe that their will is more important than the will of the American people, and will weaponize intelligence by leaking it to their friends within the mainstream media with the intent of undermining President Trump's agenda.